Okay, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the first Fogra webinar. My name is Andy Krauser and I will be the presenter of the seminar entitled FograCert Co about official and unofficial standardization and certification. This seminar is the first seminar being part of a series of planned seminars covering information and guidance for typical questions that we consider to be important for you. In particular, this webinar is intended to meet the schedule of the Asian Pacific countries. However, it will be recorded and uploaded on our webpage later today. Depending on the webinar subject, we consider to share them either exclusively for our members or for anyone. That depends on the individual webinar. Next to me sits my colleague Peter Karp. He will be the organizer. That means that he makes sure that your questions will be answered and that anything runs smoothly in the coming 30 to 35 minutes. Let's start with some housekeeping rules. If you hear me now, that means you have done anything correctly. That's a good sign. If not, just use the question panel on your right and type a question, and my colleague Peter Karp will try to help you. So that control panel on your right is the most important tool for you to navigate and especially to ask questions. All of you are muted by default, so you can't speak by default. We will have a Q&A, a question and answer session at the end. However, if you feel that your question is important to us during the presentation, just type it in and Peter will then unmute you on an individual basis, and so you can ask questions while we are talking. Okay, let's get started. The webinar is structured into 6 parts. You see here our agenda. I will start with a presentation of what is Fogra and who. I will then explain 3 levels or types of standards. It's important for you to understand later. Then I will give an overview of the right perspective, because when you talk about customers, they have different intentions and different ideas. So this is important to get this helicopter perspective. Then we try to demystify a few of our certifications and models, pricing models, because those CPC and VPC abbreviations are quite commonly used, and they not rarely lead to some confusion, to be honest. In Chapter 5 we will talk about the difference between PSO and G7, because that also causes some confusions in the market, and I would like to give my view on that topic. And last but not least, we will have some question sessions if you ask a question at the end, or as I said, use your question panel on the right and ask the question while we are speaking. What is Fogra? Fogra was founded in 1951 and it has currently 55 employers. We are located only here in Munich. We are a members organization and we have approximately 700 members, with 60% national and already 40% international members. Fogra represents the interest of all members, and since they span the entire production chain from supplier over print houses, print shops and print buyers, we are damned to neutrality. And I always like to say we represent Barack Obama and Sarah Palin at the same time. Fogra is active in 4 different activities or fields, and that starts with research and development, applied research and development based on important projects coming from the industry. Then with that experience and knowledge we do consultancies, measuring and expert opinions. With that we not keep our findings and reports, we try to publicize them. One example is Fogra Softproof Handbook, which is now downloaded more than 60,000 times, available in German and English. And last but not least, committee work as I said, we represent the interest of our members. They are very eager to get international standards and not national standards, especially in this global world. And that is a basic difference to many of the other organizations. We do first research, and based on that findings and experiences, we then apply consultancy and certification. And that also relates to our business model, so to speak, because anyone knows doing research and development, this is never beneficial. Losses. Just to get an idea, in the middle of Fogra we have our 4 technical departments, and you see Fogra is like a sandwich between our members. Here's a member basis, and here's a board of directors, so to speak, and next to our 4 departments, technical departments in the different fields, you can read that here. I will briefly give you an idea of people working here. So you see here my colleagues, you see then the printing technology department. Jürgen Gemeinert is the head, this gentleman here, of that department. We then have a print finishing and ID cards department with Arne being the head of the department there. And then we did some restructuring internally, so we have 2 more images here with the former material department. You might know Dr. Uwe Berthold. He is also convener of Working Group 4 and the chairman of TC 130. And then we have our chemistry and environment with the head Dr. Wolfgang Rau on the right. That gives you an idea of what we do and what Fogra is. And very importantly, I would like to help you to familiarize with our webpage, because it's very important to understand. And for that reason, I would like to briefly switch to our browser here. And you can see here now the webpage, the Fogra webpage. And most important is this button here to switch between German and English. So let's do that. And in order to understand, you see here the first level, the first hierarchy. And I will give you a very brief overview of important fields. First, it is research. Here at research, you see the different fields of activities along the food chain in the graphic arts. And this gives an overview of running, so projects which are in progress, but also completed research. For instance, the Normlight research project, here you find some methods to evaluate with practical means your Normlight situation. Digital printing, that is very important for us. Here you find a lot of projects in the realm of digital printing, for instance image quality, and here you see what kind of actual research we do. If you would like to see, for instance, what we do with homogeneity here, you can see, okay, what is the M-score, how to evaluate it, and what you always see is that you sometimes see the text here, you are not authorized, and I will come to that in a second. So we have research, we have the second hierarchy here and the third one here. Very important is FograCert. This gives you an overview of our different certifications, ranging from pre-press over print certifications with the new PSD certification, print finishing, materials, and our qualified partners. I will talk about that more. And we have standardizations, where you will find our ISO news, which is a series of articles I recommend you to download and to digest, because it updates you on what has been discussed in the ISO committees. And as of June 2002, we also provide that as an EPUB. So you can read it also in the S-Bahn. Here you find characterization data, for instance, if you want to download Fogra 39, or you would like to see which characterization data reflect which printing process, and is it an deprecated characterization data, or is it an actual one. Soft-proof digital printing gives you an overview of the standards, the current status of the project, and so on. But I told you there is something more, because this test page, this website is constructed in a way that if you are logged in, you see more information. That means if you have not registered so far, you need to register here. And after you've registered, you have then the possibility to see much more. And if I use my login here to show you that briefly, depending on your privileges and your rights, you're now logged in, and that means, for instance, if you go to the FograCert area, PSD and download, you are now able, for instance, to download the PSD handbook here. If you do that before, it will tell you that you are not authorized. I will talk about that later, why this is the case, but here you see all the different downloads, the PDFX ready profiles and so forth. So that was a brief overview of our webpage, and if you have any questions about that, then just don't hesitate to let us know. Okay, coming back to our presentation. Three levels of standard is our second chapter here, and this is important because the word standard is often used wrongly, and I would like to give you my understanding of three important levels. There might be more, and I consider this a useful but arbitrary characterization. The first level, the first type, is the most important, the highest quality, so to speak. It is an ISO standard or an CIE standard, and what I mean is if you follow the procedures of a worldwide recognized authority. And at the end of this you have a published norm, standard document, and that really has the benefit of being a stable standard, because it is a long time to create it, and anyone knows that who's active in that area, but then you can rely on that. You can't change it quickly. Typical examples are ISO 9001, 12647-2, 3664 for the viewing light, or CIE 15 for colorimetry. So the next level I call de facto standards, and de facto standards are some code of practices. They might be written in the same wording and the same structure as an ISO standard, but can also be structured differently, and it is defined by industry sector or branch. And I consider this a technical specification. So that is not an ISO standard, it's a technical specification. It might be very nice, but it does not pass the requirements and the rules of ISO, for instance. That means, of course, you can come up with something like this much, much quicker, but if you're not lucky, then it might also be a moving target, because it changed from time to time quite quickly. So that really depends on the institute or the industry sector which provides that kind of de facto standard. Typical examples are PSO, PSD, G7 press calibration, the media standard print, not the Apple Finder protocol, it is advanced functional printing, the Gantt working group spec, HTML5. So all of them are proposed by a group of people doing some good for the industry, but still it's a group of people, and it's not recognized by an international worldwide authority. And the third type I call a house standard. It is a company-grown procedures and requirements, and that, like PDF before it was brought to ISO, PostScript, that means Adobe fully controls what they share and what they don't, and from today to tomorrow they can decide to disclose it or to open it or whatever. So that's why it might be very popular, but still it's important that it's one company and it can change from one day to the next day. So you see there are some pros and cons to all of them, but this kind of segmentation is important to understand when you later hear about some certification or accreditation, because that is gives you some feeling of the maturity of this document, which is the basis for a certification. Yeah, coming to certifications, I would like to give you the horizon. I would like to introduce you the gamut, the range from a very high rigorous value programs, which are based on accredited auditors and labs. There are guides for labs and management system standards, which are in place for security printing and other stuff. This is very rigorous. On the other hand, there are today certifications for anything. You know, you get a certificate for having a coffee sometimes. This is used inflationary, and it is mostly required by marketing teams. And I call this sometimes this ISO flavors for decorations. And if you see that area, that range, you might have here a Procter & Gamble requirement, which is very tough. If you have read such a thing, they sometimes require you to check any print of a print run of 100,000, quite sporty, at least in the days without image inspection, and a certificate of attendance. And the question is that every time if you talk about a certification program, you must try to find out where you are between that two areas. And in my point of view, the most important thing is trust, because you must trust that entity, that organization, that people to do a good job, because there are a lot of reasons to do something wrong, also in the graphic arts industry. Coming to the user's perspective, I would like to give you an overview of the different intents. And if I think about the audience, from my point of view or from Fogra point of view, we see at least 3 different types of audience. And since they are different, they ask different things, and we need to think about how do we reflect those different needs. And that is manufacturers. They would like to test or certify their ink, their paper, the system, their software, and that is their intention. Service providers are more in the area to say, okay, I would like to certify or to test my ability to create green prints, to create a PSO conforming print, to create this or this. So, and of course to a reasonable price. And end users at the end are print buyers, and they don't really care about this extensive test. They just see a print. They just see a print and would like to say, is it conforming or not? And if they do a reclamation, if they dispute this or this, it is a question, can I now, but just based on the print, piece of printed matter, can I now say something about it? And let's have a look how this ecosystem is constructed. For proofing, you might know the standard 12647-7, and that defines exactly the rules and specification for proofing systems. So it lists a long list of requirements for proofing systems, and our contract proofing system, CPS exactly reflects the criteria defined in that area. The same is true for the site certification, as it calls in that standard. So 12647-7 also provides specification for creators, which is less rigorous. And here we are at the premise and test the system extensively for 2 days. Here it is contract proof creation, CPC. Here we just test the ability of the system by means of print service providers download our test pages and then print it out and send it to us. Let me briefly show you that here on our web page. If you see FograCert, you go to prepress and you go look to proofing. You see our proofing system certification here with the requirements. You can see the certified systems you can sort it and search for it, and proof creation. You can also see which kind of companies have been certified. 216. You can use sort by your zip code or your country to find certified companies. Okay. One second. Okay, how about the end user perspective? Is that considered or that defined at 12647-7? The brief answer is no. 12647-7 does not define how a proof, just being your typical layout with a wedge, a control wedge, is conforming or not. So for end users, there's no provision at all in this standard. So we here, in Germany or Europe or wherever, we propose to use the media standard print. It's a free of charge documentation provided by the BVDM. And that says, okay, if you would like to have a conformance print, use this Fogra media wedge and use those criteria which can be applied to such a wedge. And so they're using those criteria, but only those which are applicable for a media wedge, version 2 or 3. So something like legibility or vignettes or uniformity is of course not covered here. Okay, now you see the structure behind 12647-8, which was published this year finally, has the same. It outlines, it provides certification requirements for a validation print, which is similar to a proofing system, which has a little bit higher, or not higher, wider tolerances, and it's based for color references in the creative field. They also only is a one-off. So both contract proofing and validation prints are only for the print run length of 1. Yeah, and you might know, okay, now with VPC, validation print creation, Part 8 defines requirement for service providers to be able to create validation prints. And for end users, the same applies here. Here, the PSD handbook provides the settings, what is needed. One difference here is, of course, Part 7 does not define which kind of control wedge you have to use. Here, we have a general definition of control wedges. Here, we said it shall be the Fogra media wedge. That is one important difference, for instance. Coming from one-offs to offset printing, how about manufacturers here? There's nothing specific, very specific. There's a machine acceptance test we offer here, and I point you to our webpage to learn more here. We have the PSO certification, which we do together with the BVDM. This is the service provider certification, which is valid for 2 years. And if you make a PSO conformance check with one of the many software packages out there, you can do a typical 12647-2 conformance check for offset printing. How about digital printing? In digital printing, we have the same scenario here, and the solution or the answer here is the so-called system check. So the 15311, the new standard or the new document, because we are at the very beginning of the standard, you know, that's a long procedure from birth to childhood, kindergarten, school, university, and life. And here I would say we are now at the kindergarten. However, you can access that document and you can see that it provides a system check, which is exactly the answer for those people, because those manufacturers mostly look for a certification for their digital production systems. But they ask us and other people, and we said, we don't have something like a system check here which tests your system production system, not print run lengths of 1, no, the entire production. But that's why many of the digital print manufacturers have chosen the validation printing system, because I consider this the one-eyed in the island of blinds in that respect, because it was the only one existing which is close to that. And it is very rigorous, so if you think negatively about it. Just try out whether you meet those criteria and let me know. This is a system check. We have the PSD certification, which is the answer for the service provider. And here, as here, this is a de facto standard. It is using the ISO standard where applicable, but provides additional information and requirements. And here, for the end users, now we have the print check, which is defined also in 15.3.11. I'm sorry, I was a little bit too quick. I think that is the most important slide for today to understand, because the most problems I see in the market is that people confuse different certifications and don't see what is really the intention of the people to see, okay, is it like this, is it like this, is it for conventional printing, is it for digital printing, and is it for one-offs. The print check here is also defined in 15.3.11, and so you see already, while 12.647 and 8 address the manufacturer needs and the service provider needs and not the end user needs, the 15.3.11 says, okay, we address those needs and do this on a Fogra specific way. Okay, now let's come to our fourth chapter, and I would like to introduce you briefly our pricing model that is also a reason for some confusion. The normal way is that the client is a non-member or hopefully a member, and in case you are a non-member, you pay the normal price. Let's say for contract proof creation or validation print creation, 295 euros. If you are a member, you talk with us and you do the same, you get a discount of 30% and you pay typically 70%. That is the normal way for our services, for all of our services. If you buy a media wedge, if you come to a symposium, if you make an expert opinion, if you make a certification, you name it. However, I told you already that we have almost 40% international members, and that means the language and travel distances grow also. And we thought about how do we address this? And we address this by thinking about having partners that help us to conduct specific services. Not all services, but partners help us to do the service. And so you see already in that case, it's the partner has a direct contact to the client, be it a non-member or a member, and we don't have a direct contact anymore because the partner now can do the consultancies, the preparation, and help them to perform the certification. And very important, the certification is still done by Fogra because the partner sent all the materials to us and we check it. We have two different kinds of partnerships right now. This is a digital print expert, DPE, and depending on the service, this partner is able to do and to offer for a lower price is indicated here. So this logo tells you this partner has passed the criteria, the Fogra criteria to be a digital print expert and can do the validation print creations for a lower price. And the digital print expert here with CPC says contract proof creation, and you guess it, PSD is the partner which is able to conduct the PSD audit, or the PSO partner if you are in the conventional area. And as a partner here for contract proof creation or VPC, you get an additional discount of 30%. So the prices for 2012, I think it's 140 euro. So that is the difference. So you will be invoiced by us for 140 euros, and that gives you a margin for your clients depending whether it is a member or a non-member. And here you see the same structure as we've seen before in the web page. You see the FograCert is a modular concept, and we have different certifications in the prepress area, data handling, proofing, validation print, soft proof, viewing cabinet, and then print, data handling. This is always the same, or not always, but this is the same here just because we think about how people look for some tests or some certification, and some certifications like data handling are important both for prepress and for print. We have print finishing, we have materials, And we have our qualified partners here, which are either digital print experts with the 3 additional modules or conventional print partners. So that might help you to understand a little bit the certification ecosystem, to not ask for the FograCert, to ask for the specific Fogra certification. Let's come to our new candidate here, which is the PSD handbook. The PSD guide is a process standard digital and is more or less a brother of the PSO, and the guidelines have been published by Fogra in 2012 in German at the beginning, and the English version was published at Fogra. So I will show you in a second how do you download that. The discussion and further development of that work was done in the Digital Printing Working Group, and that international group is more or less responsible for that work. And this group, which is an open group where anyone is invited to join, there's no exclusivity at all. This group is important, and this group is responsible for the further development of that handbook. The criteria for the certification, for the service provider certification, they are finished for more than 1 year, and that certification is rolled out and runs very smoothly, national and internationally. I like to say for the PSO, the 12647 is a heart. It's very important. It is the main thing. If that dies, PSO dies more or less. It's very hard, but let me put it like this. For PSD, the 15311 is just a kit name. So you can live with one if you want. It is more about just this one document. It's about the interplay and the use cases, depending facilitation of the standard. It's not just about downloading 3 standards and understanding them. It is also about nicely combining them in a reasonable fashion. And that is what all PSD is all about. It's a handbook which provides guidelines. You don't go to jail if you don't stick to them, and they are all informative, and they represent typical or guidelines, tolerances, and aim values for industrial typical production for specific use cases. 15311-1 is at CT stage. This might be another webinar where I explain the different stages. You know, the childhood, kindergarten, school, preschool, high school, university stage, until you have reached a published ISO standard. Part 2 and Part 3 address different use cases. Part 1 is kind of a toolbox which outlines the method to measure uniformity, to measure lightfartness, to measure ruggedness, blurriness, and so forth. And 2 and 3 and other parts which might come in the future, they address the use case. 2 for digital production printing, 3 for large format printing. And since the industry is moving forward, and since PSD will reflect that industry, it must be a moving and living document, but we plan to make 1 revision per year. So we will make some final editorial revisions on the existing one, and then we plan to have a 2013 PSD and a PSD to 14 and to 15 and so forth. But that will be subject to the discussion of the next meeting of the Digital Printing Working Group. The online versions will be free of charge, the same with the softbook cookbook. A very brief overview of the PSD. What is it all about? The 1-sentence summary is printing the expected. We would like to print the expected. We would like to offer a framework that you're able to understand the expectation of your customer. Is he going to a 5-star hotel or a youth hostel? And then how to print that expectation. And in order to achieve that expectation, that underlying concept, we propose 3 main columns here, which is the output process control, important for stability and consistency. Then color fidelity, where we check printing the expected, what is the quality area, and you might know that we not only have a yes, no, on, off, pregnant, non-pregnant. conformance evaluation, like it is in 12647-2, we have a gradual rating A, B, C at the moment. And workflow, which is also important, where we check that you use the right software and tools to print the expected. Coming back to our DPE, this is an overview of this digital print expert next to the PSO partner, and the concept is here to have a basic qualification, like a medical doctor here, and then you have additional modules where you say, okay, I would like to provide a VPC installation because my clients have this digital printers, and I would like to finish my installation with such a Fogra independent certification here. Or if you are more in the contract proofing, conventional printing world, you want to do the same for proofing systems. And the CPC is the old FograCert certification. I'll give you a very brief overview here. You see it here if you go to qualified partners, digital print experts, and you can see digital print partners. You can see whether you are already a partner or not, or who is your closest partner next to your door. And you see the FograCert, which is the old certification for partners for doing the CPC. So this will expire soon, so don't be surprised when this will be vanished in a few months to come. Okay, let's come to the last portion of our webinar here. It is about G7 and why there is a debate. G7 is a technical specification, so not an ISO standard, very important. And there are current activities to define it, at least nationally, because we will come to that in a minute. They were not successful to define it internationally. And that is the current document. And in order to understand this press calibration technique, I just present here one slide from Don Hutchinson. He's very active in that area, of course you might know him. And the basic understanding and the basic concept of G7 is that you have a predefined triplet of CMY tone value combinations which must be neutral. So this arbitrary set of CMYK or CMY combinations must be rendered neutral. And that means all output presses, flexo, digital, whatever, must be calibrated in order to achieve that aim. And that is important to understand because that is a fundamental difference to what 12647-2 defines in order to make the process control. Now we'll talk about that in a second. 12647-1, it's its introduction, 2 for commercial printing and 3 for cold set printing. They define equal TVI. So they say for each printing unit they should have the same tone value increase or dot gain and a reasonable solid coloration as a basis for printing condition. So that means that different printing condition, different papers, different inks, different screenings, or even ink sequences have their own gray balance. So we don't say, or this standard does not say, this is a predefined gray balance. It is saying, no, we go from the physics of the operating window of a printing process, and that defines prepress. And that means each printing condition needs an adequate prepress. And if you, I like to compare that in just the viewpoint, and that's that for us, 12647 print is the dog and prepress the tail. So the printer and the printing side, the printing perspective is the important thing. We focus on then, and prepress must follow. Prepress must see, okay, which is the printing condition to go, and then prepare the data to separate or re-separate the data, retarget the data for that specific press condition. Because then the press operator can run his easy aims and can get his or her process control. G7 is the other way around. They say prepress is the dog and press the tail. That means prepress is tone value combination must always be rendered neutral, and the press must follow, whatever it means for the press, whatever. And here you see typical characterization data sets, and they reflect that concept. You have different TVI curves. There are designated here B and C and the others. There are tables for that. And you see like Fogra 43 considers offset printing on coated paper, matte or cloth paper with a non-periodic screening. And that is very important because we will see that later. If you do non-periodic screening, the characteristic is very different than AM. And even if you match the grays, the primary or secondary gradients look very different, and you will have U-shifts. And that is something you can't compensate, and you can't compensate that in the G7 process at all. Okay, why there's a debate? The short answer is because of money. The long answer, and that is my personal opinion, comes now. TC130, the working group 3 in technical committee, decided for the prescribed equal TVI calibration method and none for the near-neutral approach. So that means even in the years before my presence there, they said, okay, we agree as a worldwide committee to have this equal TVI approach as the right process control for the press operator. And although some of the grade-rule data sets are within the tolerances of 12647 spot-on data sets, they are not equally valid. That is a very big confusion. People say, okay, my data set is inside the tolerances, so I'm equally valid. That is untrue. Very important feature. And just use some extreme printing condition and then you will see it. Just if you run an FM, non-periodic printing, and run the G7 calibration over this print, and you will see the resulting TVIs, which are of course different then, for each color. They are all over the place. And that means they, in this case, they will be not inside the tolerances of 12647. And that's why the wish, the requirement of the industry to have a combined data set or a unified characterization data set, it's doable, but it either is based on G7, like the Greco 2006 data set, or it is based on 12647, like all the Fogra data sets, or it is neither based on G7 nor 12647 equal TVI. It is a synthetic, averaged Salomon data independent of any press calibration, and that is currently the hope, or my personal hope in working group 3, to achieve this aim. We have more or less consensus of that way to try to propose UCDs, unified characterization data, so agreed upon characterization data worldwide, not Fogra 39 in Europe and Greco 26 in US and Japan coded there, and the other one must pick. It is important to see whether we are able to agree there or not. We will see. However, G7 is an established business model facing this increased popularity of ISO. And they see, okay, printing to 12647-2 is quite sexy and popular. So they try, of course, to see, can we maybe change 12647 to include G7 or other way around. And again, anyone there knows that this is a tedious and lengthy process, but working group 3, still the majority of working group 3 says no, we would like to keep 12647 and we might add that, but then having different press calibration techniques, it's also a question, why having a standard when you allow more of them? So for the most important figure is that PSO is 100% 12647-2, so it is 100%, there's no difference at all. And so the characterization data are the new one. For Fogra 27, you can see that we failed to achieve it. Then we fixed it, our problem and our error, and Fogra 39 now perfectly reflects this. And G7 is not perfect hit on 12647. And that feature, that kind of fact, that is not embraced, obviously, by the G7 contributors. And that's why they try to use the facts which are true, and it is a decent press calibration, but leave out a few details which, in my opinion, are important. Here you can see what kind of options do you have and why G7 is not bad at all, and you can work according to it quite nicely. If you, let's say, here have your RGB image and you separate it with ISO-coated, and the printer makes a TVI-based calibration, you make a Fogra 39 proof, and you print according to 12647-2, then the print to proof will very look the same. And there are many, many examples why this works. The same for the G7 calibration. If you do a separation to G7 and you make the G7 calibration and you print according to it, you will see a nice proof to print match. So that's why they are so successful. So it's actually a nice technology. But they just happen to not be the one defined in 12647-2. And you can also use something to say, make a gray code separation, and you can extract the TVI, which is then of course not equal TVI, from it, and make a TVI-based calibration with those not equal TVIs, and you will also assure and get a print-to-proof match. So you see there are different ways leading to Rome, as we say, and that's why the only difference is that that is the one defined in 12647, and the other one not. There are new standards coming where this is allowed also, but that is something like, I call it a matching standard, like the 15339, where you say, give me a characterization data set and match it, and I don't care how you do it. And that is one of the biggest differences, and these are the biggest point where we have some disputes, because we still put the printer, the print operator, and the print shop in the focus, and would like to have an easy life for them, or as easy as possible, while many other contributors, especially in the USA, know the print buyer is the focus here, and the press must follow. And I don't see it as an either or. Even with the PSO, you can address those needs very nice. So let's summarize. We think that the PSO, where the English version will be available soon, is a better press calibration than the G7 for some reasons. First, it is press-oriented. It's really addressing the imaging process. It's really dedicated for that offset process and allows for offset process, print process control. How to react printing unit by printing unit. If you see the resulting gray balance, that's very important. That's very important, right? But you don't exactly know what do you have to fix in each printing unit, and there's something going wrong there. So it's very hard for the real process control, which actually needs to adjust the ink keys in each printing unit. And PSO, so 12647, also of course allows for checking gray balance and gray reproduction, although it failed to put that into focus. So it was not marketed at all, but you can do a gray balance, and if you know this BVDM ECI test charts, then the gray cons, you know that you can use that. The only difference is here that every printing condition has its individual tone value combination. So you need different control bars for the different printing conditions, and that is a benefit of G7. You just need one, but still it is then not, it just makes printers, and that is my hardest critique, it makes printers to color matchers. It assumes that they are savvy color management experts, device link users, and match anything, irrespectively of what technology they use. And that is the biggest critique I have. PSO is not bonded to commercial software tools. It is fixed for many years, so you can access those documents, stable documents. My experiences with the G7 document, to be honest, it is not so stable, and for instance, the tolerances for the G7 conformance are only available for 1 year. So all the time before, there were some workarounds, but it was not published tolerances to say, here you are in, here you are out. So G7 is a decent press calibration technique, and if used correctly, you can end up with similar or even exact the same results as when you print to 12647-2. But confusing G7, so using G7 separated data and printing them on a 12647 calibrated press and other way around, that might end up in problems. How do I see the future, and that is my last slide for our webinar, is I think printing the expected is the main goal. You have a print buyer who's looking for consistent color appearance across channel, tablet, internet, DVD. Printing is just one channel, and we or Fogra thinks as long as we have process-oriented calibration and technologies and tools which are successfully used in the industry for decades, we keep with them. And for digital printing, although you can use those principles also for that, yes, you can technically do. But why? Here you have successfully implemented tools, why change them? And so we try to provide requirements and tolerances here and some here. So, let me summarize. I hope you get a better overview of what Fogra is and what we do, and to know our webpage a little bit better, and to find now some important information we prepare. We plan more webinars in the future, like PSD in a nutshell, more details about the different certifications, but we also kindly invite your opinion to let us know what you would like us to present. And with that, I would like to finish that webinar. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm open for questions right now, and I will look next to Peter and check. Okay. So if you have any questions, just indicate it to Peter, or just ask a question, and then he will unmute you, and then you can use your mic and to ask a question. Don't be so shy. Just unmute him.
Hi, Andy. Thanks very much. This was very interesting and a great overview. I was just wondering how 15339 fits into this picture.
What, one more time?
I was just wondering how 15339 fits into the picture.
Yeah. Okay. 15339 is a document which I love and hate at the same time. It covers tolerances and printing, which I don't like, and if we get rid of that, I completely love it, because at the beginning it was introduced as exactly here, a standard for data exchange data. So if we manage in working group 3 to reduce printing tolerances at all and just make it the standard for press calibration neutral characterization data sets here, which can be used as an exchange space. So a few sets of very decently selected tolerances, then that is the right place for 15339, because it navigates between the print buyers here and the process control here, and then the conventional printers can use 12647- whatever, and digital printers can use 15311 to match that expectation. Does that answer the question? Jan? Okay, are there any more questions? So the 15339, just to fill the gap, is heatedly debated right now, and it depends on the next Chicago meeting. Hopefully we find a way forward. There are different perspectives, viewpoints, and for those of you who are interested in see the details, you might ask your national representatives from your national body to have access to the minutes, to the protocol, and then you can see what the group decides, who's in favor, who's against it, what are the viewpoints, and that helps you to make your own opinion. And because that is my viewpoint here, and I highly recommend to understand and to digest many different viewpoints, and the minutes is a very good starting point to see what people have, why people have different interests and different requirements. Peter, any more questions? Yes, one more question.
Hello. Hello.
Yes.
This is Jürgen. I just wanted to add something to your response to Jan's question. So 15339, from my point of view, has a great potential to be a platform for exchange color spaces. As we have seen during Andy's presentation, the PSD is already touching the area where we're not able to have an absolute colorimetrical assessment anymore as we have in proofing or traditional printing today. In the digital printing market, we're going more to have relative colorimetric comparison, where we need to establish better measurement for such quality criteria. If we take the G7 method, if we take PSO as a print setup where we just look at the solids and the TBIs, but also if we look into the Japanese market where we have other tolerances in offset printing, where we have other behavior, another tag on the printing ink in offset, for example, I would see this as a regional flavor of standardization of presses, and 15339 should at the end be the platform to establish a more neutral, independent exchange color spaces with the conforming quality criteria to be printable wherever in the world, and then also to be really open for the digital printing market.
Oh, great. Thank you very much, Jürgen. We have also this raise hand icon here, so if you like, you can press that hand in your control panel to indicate Peter that you would like to have him unmuted you. Okay, but we are right in 1 hour, so if there are no more open questions, I would like to thank you for your attention. I wish you a nice rest of the days. For those in the Asian Pacific area,